Hello and welcome to another episode of Punk Rock Politics with John Smith here. Um, in case that was somehow unclear, I'm John Smith. We have a really important issue to discuss today, and it's about the results in Texas, in the Texas primary. There's been a lot of changes since 2013 Supreme Court decision that overturned some crucial voting rights laws that required states with a racist history of suppressing the vote to go to the federal government for request of any changes, in how they operate polling places, etc. How people vote essentially. So we have a lot of interesting articles here, and I'm going to be making more brief videos, and I'm going to be putting up a lot more content in today, tonight, and in days to come. And I apologize for the gap in the content since my last couple of videos, but I had numerous technical issues with YouTube and spent a lot of time in research and ended up losing numerous videos, and that I'm very disappointed because I thought that I did a better job, an even better job than I did in the first video, and definitely a better job in general. So it was literally 8 to 12 hours of time spent on the phone with Samsung and trying to do research and trying to get help from them to solve this YouTube problem, and doing all kinds of things. But nonetheless, let's move on past that. So this is a big issue, and it affects the youth vote, minority vote, and particularly in this discussion, it's going to revolve around the Latinx community and the African American or Black community. So these are historically people who vote more progressive, especially with the youth across all demographics, but definitely in this current race. The Latin population is, especially in Texas, particularly in Texas, and there's a lot of data to back this up, was overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders. So are the youth vote, definitely the youth Black vote, and increasingly even the numbers were improving, especially right up to Super Tuesday for Bernie Sanders nationally, where he was getting a majority of all Black voters from all, combined from all age groups. But there is an issue with older Black voters who are more conservative, just like any other group of voters, unfortunately. But here's what we're going to discuss. Now, here's an article from Common Dreams, okay? And I'm going to read through it. Now, again, I'm working out some kinks, and I'm going to, soon enough have articles pop up, and we're going to be able to read them together, and we're going to scroll through them, but don't worry, I'm pretty good at enunciating and being clear and reading things, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. So here is the article title from Common Dreams, which underneath it says Breaking News and Views for the Progressive Community. Anyway, the title of this is Absolutely Unconscionable. Hours-long lines to vote in Texas on Super Tuesday point to a bigger systemic problem. That problem, to put it bluntly, is that people in power in state government have no interest in making it easier for Texans to vote. This is an article by Jessica Corbett, who is a staff writer, and it came out Wednesday, March 4th, 2020. Okay, let's get into this. After Texas voters waited in hours-long lines on Super Tuesday, voting rights experts and advocates highlighted the state's systemic problems with election administration, expressed concerns about the possibility of similar issues in November, and urged elected officials to make it easier, not harder, for Texans to get to the ballot box. This is quoted, "Long lines in any single county can happen for any number of reasons, but multi-hour wait times all over the state point to a bigger systemic problem," Common Cause Texas Executive Director Anthony Gutierrez said in a statement Wednesday. That problem, to put it bluntly, is that people in power in state government have no interest in making it easier for Texans to vote. Now they show a tweet here from Christoph Spieler, which is at Christoph Spieler, and Spieler is spelled Spieler, in case you're interested, and Christoph is Christof, so Christoph Spieler on Twitter. The line at TSU, which I believe is Texas State University, Houston, for the Texas Democratic Party, 30 minutes after the polls closed. The line continues inside the building. From the front doors to the voting booth, took me over 2 hours in line, and nobody in this picture has made it that far yet. Just to show the picture, here we go. Sorry. That's the picture of people waiting in line. from the tweet I just quoted in the article. So then it continues in the article. During and after official voting hours, reporters and voters alike shared anecdotes on Twitter of the long lines in Texas. Among them was Hervis Rogers, the last voter to cast a ballot at his polling station, Texas Southern University in Houston. Rogers waited for nearly 7 hours, finally made it to the ballot box around 1:30 a.m., then went straight to work his night shift. Now, I just want to stop here and say how important it is that we should have a national holiday for all elections. Every single election from local, state, local, county, state, and federal government we should be given a holiday. And while we still have hourly workers who have no benefits or count desperately on, working every shift because they can't afford to lose the money, they don't have sick days or they don't get paid when they don't go to work regardless. Like, they can call out sick, but they lose that hourly wage or those tips or whatever it is. Those people should be reimbursed. And everybody should be given a day off for elections. And they should be able to voice, to have their voice heard. And they should be participating. We should increase democracy, not decrease it. And it seems like both parties, in different ways and at different times, depending on who the candidates are, what their interests are, seem to want to decrease our vote, despite rhetoric from the Democratic Party. Let's be clear, the Republican Party has gone to astonishing and just borderline evil levels to disenfranchise voters. So I want to be clear that the Democratic Party is typically better on this, but it's seemingly, since 2016, the Sanders competition between Hillary Clinton and in 2020, it seems like they're not so concerned with minority votes and young votes because they're afraid that they're going to vote for the person that the people in power do not want, because he directly would threaten their wealth, their holdings of stock in news organizations that are supposed to hold their feet to the flame and clearly often don't, and in actuality actually end up more than not putting forth their propaganda unquestionably. They don't ask them hard questions. This is true of how they propped up Senator Elizabeth Warren, how they've been propping up Joe Biden, how they propped up Pete Buttigieg despite his numerous levels of corruption in Iowa and the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary. You could look into that. There's a lawsuit in New Hampshire against Pete Buttigieg. And there's just a bunch of information from Iowa, and it's a long story, but we'll leave that for another time. This will all be discussed at length, and I really hope you like my channel, share it, follow, and hopefully consider subscribing through Patreon at the multiple levels of subscription, or just throwing in any money you have or can afford to help the cause. Either way, I'm going to be doing this regardless of whether I make money or not. It's really important to me. I've been studying political science and history, both traditionally and non-traditionally, throughout my whole life. Singing about it, telling jokes about it, having discussions about it in all different formats and forums, working for environmental organizations, interning for environmental organizations, volunteering for environmental organizations. I volunteered for Bernie Sanders in 2016 and made some steps to do so in 2020, and I'm going to be getting involved in that too more heavily. Anyway, so let me continue. So we were discussing this poor gentleman who had to go to work after waiting in line and not leaving the ballot box till around 1:30. Another source had it at 1:20 when he was outside being interviewed by reporters, and he had to go work the night shift. So that's something else to consider that I wanted to get to, is that, if we're going to have all these polling problems and somebody has to go to work at 2 a.m, the next morning technically, or in the middle of the night, they should also be given some leeway so they can vote and relax and not have to worry about losing money. We should open up the democratic process. Anyway, the article continues. The Harris County Clerk's Office reportedly insisted there were no major issues and that the outrageous waiting times were simply down to a high turnout and not enough machines. Oh, wow. How many times have we had issues, this is me talking here, sorry, with not enough voting booths or machines? Maybe we should listen to the progressive candidates that have been calling for paper ballots. Now, maybe machines should still be used because paper ballots can disappear or be lit on fire, but it seems that it's a little harder if you have independent observers and people really, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm losing my thought process for a second here. If you have transparency over this whole process, including how when the votes are moved in a van, you have independent observers. We really need to invest in our electoral infrastructure. All right, this is not just about Russia, and quite frankly, it's barely about Russia compared to what we've done, and I don't want to get into all that right now, but the Russia narrative has been used to hurt Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, who I definitely do not like, but there has been a disproportionate narrative used that it's like we act like all of our elections were totally fair and nobody was involved in any of our history prior to this, and it's this giant aberration which historically is wildly untrue. It doesn't make it okay. I'm not if but I have a lot of things to say on that, but I'm not going to get into that now. But nonetheless, we really need to make sure that this country allows and does everything they can to allow people to go to the polls. Okay? Excuse me a second. I'm noticing there is some nice natural light coming in from the window that appears to have dimmed, and it was getting weird and changing shades on my face. So let me continue the article, but I just wanted to pause and say a few things there, obviously. So now, the article continues. So we're talking about the voting machines. And this was according to the Daily Beast, the issue with how there was a high turnout and not enough voting booths. Clerk Diane Trautman, and that's Trautman, and she's at D Trautman on Twitter, in case you want to ask her any questions. Or I would strongly suggest, I'm going to pause again real quick, that you look up Diane Trautman's record, and that you find out who she has supported in the past. I was trying to dig into this a little bit. I'm going to continue to, but it's not as easy to find as I was hoping. And it's taking some time, but I'm going to try to expose, and hey, maybe this was not her intent. It really was an unintentional series of mistakes, and she didn't mean to suppress the vote, but something more and more I read about this story, it seems like this was, a lot of people had their hands in the pot on this, and this definitely disproportionately hurt Bernie Sanders supporters and Bernie Sanders candidacy for the primary in 2020. So we're going to get more and more into that. But anyway, Clerk Diane Trautman said more machines were provided during the night after an extremely high turnout saw Democrats outvoting Republicans 3-1 in some places. This should be no surprise. Donald Trump is running an uncontested primary, and he's already the president, and we have a battleground in a historic election for so many reasons, just like to be Trump being on the ballot and all that stuff. And it should have been no shock to anybody that more Democrats were going to vote in this primary. We'll explain how we'll get into how the Texas primary votes in a little bit. This video is going to be as short as possible. I'll read 2 or 3 articles, and then I'm going to end it with a couple comments. My next videos are going to be shorter, much shorter, but this is an important issue, and I really want to make sure that everything's discussed and people understand the importance of all of this and how it might affect future primaries for 2020 and why you need to make your voice heard and reach out to county clerks or the Democratic Party and say we demand that we have a reasonable amount of voting time, that nobody's turned away from the polls, and that every accommodation is made so that anybody, regardless of who they are or who they want to vote for, can vote. Advocates and experts use Rogers' story to raise the alarm about voting conditions in the state. Jennifer Epps Addison, it's like, when you share your last name, Epps-Addison, president and co-executive director of the national advocacy group Center for Popular Democracy, declared on Twitter early Wednesday, "This is what #voter suppression looks like." And she's absolutely right. Just absolutely right. And she was showing the last voter who took nearly 7 hours to vote, Mr. Hervis. And just real quick, I'll try to show you her tweet. It is backwards, but the image is there. But yeah, you have, actually this was, okay, so this was a retweet she commented on. But Jennifer Epps Addison is at Jep Addison on Twitter. And she retweeted something from Ed Lavandera, which is at Ed LAVA CNN on Twitter. This is absolutely unconscionable. No one in America should ever have to wait 7 hours to vote, tweeted Mother Jones senior reporter Ari Berman, who has written extensively about voting rights across the country, including his 2015 book, Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America. After summarizing Rogers' experience for Mother Jones Wednesday, Berman wrote, there were similar reports of long lines in heavily Democratic cities across the state, including Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. While voters in California also faced delays due to a shortage of polling locations and problems with new voting technology, the longest waits took place in Texas, particularly in Houston's Harris County, where the population is 43% Latino and 19% black. Local election officials seemed unprepared for the high turnout, which was up 40% in the county compared to the 2016 Democratic primary. Should be no surprise, and for numerous reasons. There were only 6 poll workers at the Texas Southern location, according to NBC News, where 10,000 students are enrolled. 6 poll workers. 10,000 students. I mean, this was, in this particular case, I think it's pretty obvious that they were intentionally making it difficult for students to vote. I mean, you're talking about 10,000 students and only having 6 poll workers. That's unacceptable. Now, a lot of these poll workers, at least in New Jersey, I know, are volunteers, and they should be paid, but that's neither here. I mean, no, it's not neither here nor there. It's very important. People should be compensated for their time and effort. It's amazing that people volunteer, and thank you so much for doing so. It's incredible, and I'm glad enough people make this even happen, but they shouldn't be overwhelmed and working their rear ends off because they're understaffed or under-volunteered, even, you could say, because they're not even getting paid. Most or all of them in New Jersey, I think all of them, it's all volunteer, which is ridiculous. Absolutely absurd. They should at least be compensated like a fair wage, like absolute minimum $15 an hour. I mean, I guess you could argue $10 an hour. It's like slight volunteerism helping, but we shouldn't make these lesser arguments. We should have justice in general. So like $15, $20 an hour. I would argue $20 an hour. But anyway, let's continue. Let's see here. Excuse me 1 second. And the polling site had only 10 voting machines, which were 20 years old. 20 years old. Unbelievable. 5 of them broke down for part of the night, exacerbating the long lines. With many local races, Texas voters faced a very long ballot that took a long time to fill out. Texas troubles weren't just a case of bureaucratic incompetence or aging election infrastructure. The long lines were also by design. They were on purpose, is what he is saying. And I just want to make sure we understand who this is, because this is a great quote. So this is Ari Berman, who wrote extensively, Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America. Okay, yeah, this was Berman. All right, I just wanted to make sure, Ari Berman. So this is a great quote, and there's something to further dig into and make sure that future and all primaries and caucuses are fair, but also that we massively reform our electoral system in this country so that everybody can vote and that it's easy, quick. I mean, it's 2020. It's not 1820. It's ridiculous. Or even 1920 for that matter, or even 1970. This is absolutely absurd. So let me continue the article. I apologize, but I'm adding content to this content. I will I should almost 100%. It shouldn't be an issue. I will have links to the articles from now on that I am discussing at the bottom of the channel on YouTube, and I'm going to try to get out there and connect my channel to other social media sites. I'm on Patreon, on Twitter for my at Occupy Hazlitt NJ account, and I also have my Facebook band page, which I haven't used in a very long time, but there's still some good content out there. To be fair, it's not professional. Some of it's not. It was on the spot, recorded on a phone. It wasn't, it was spontaneous. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't recorded with professional equipment. Although I am an audio engineer and producer, I need a space to be able to record. But just so you know, if you want to, get involved with Patreon and become a member, that would be greatly appreciated. But But I'm going to be working, the point is to get more social media accounts linked up and really figure this all out. But I am very passionate and will definitely help educate you. And I'm working out all the kinks for this page. But it's an important time to get involved, and I couldn't wait any longer. As Berman noted, Texas has closed 750 polling sites across the state since 2012, according to a recent report from the Leadership Conference Education Fund. A Guardian analysis based on the civil rights group's report confirms that many activists have suspected, what many activists have suspected. It confirms it. The places where the Black and Latinx population is growing by the largest numbers have experienced the vast majority of the state's poll site closures. Wow, what a surprise! And shocking. That's just shocking. Specifically, as The Guardian reported Monday, the analysis finds that the 50 counties that gained the most Black and Latinx residents between 2012 and 2018 closed 542 polling sites, compared to just 34 closures in the 50 counties that have gained the fewest Black and Latinx residents. This is despite the fact that the population in the former group of counties has risen by 2.5 million people, whereas in the latter category, the total population has fallen by over 13,000. So just to be clear and break this down and make sure everybody understands what's being said here in red, 50 counties that gained the most Black and Latinx residents between 2012 and 2018 closed 242 polling sites, whereas the 50 counties that have gained the fewest Black and Latinx residents closed just 34. And just so, where the population has risen 2.5 million people, mostly Latinx and Black, they closed 542 polling stations, and only and I shouldn't say only, and closed only 34 in counties where their population has fallen by 13%, by 13,000 in that time frame of 2012 to 2018. Where obviously this should have been massively, the number should switch, if not even way more polling should go, even more polling stations should have been open, as opposed to 242 or 542 closing. They should have kept those open and added them for a population increase of 2.5 million people. The more you read the story, the more you just get aggravated and realize that something's going on here. It's very fishy, and it didn't just happen in Texas. You have the issues in Iowa, the issues in New Hampshire, and you're going to have a lot of issues, and it's going to be, not so surprisingly, typical Bernie Sanders voters. So we need to stand up and make our voices heard and disseminate this information to everybody. I don't care if even, this is so important. So, talk to your friends and family, talk to people on the train, talk to people waiting for the coffee, try to take different tacks about how you talk to certain people, but ultimately it's important that you talk to everybody and have a debate. Whether or not they want to hear facts is irrelevant, but eventually people, when you're polite enough or find something in common with them, or if they're angry with you, you retort back with facts and data. Other people hear it, and it becomes part of the zeitgeist, and it becomes part of the debate, and it's very important that we let people know what's going on, and don't let people just say, that's ridiculous. We have facts, So anyway, that analysis received renewed attention from journalists and advocates Tuesday amid reports of they're talking about Super Tuesday. So that analysis received renewed attention from journalists and advocates Tuesday amid reports of long waiting lines for Texas voters. Excuse me 1 second, I'm having a quick issue. I apologize. So in the meantime, a tweet accidentally pulled up as I was reading the article, and what it was discussing is that there was different vote times for Democrats and Republicans, and the Republicans got way less vote times. They walked in and out and voted really easily. But anyway, that analysis received renewed attention from journalists and advocates Tuesday amid reports of long wait times for Texas voters, particularly in Democratic and diverse communities. This is Kira Lerner, which is at KIRA_LERNER on Twitter. She's a verified account. And she was tweeting a map of how it was much harder for Democratic primary voters to vote. And she continues on the thread, this isn't just a result of enthusiastic voters. Texas has closed 750 polling locations since 2012, more than any other state. The counties that gained the most Black and Latino voters lost the majority of the polling places. Berman and other experts pointed out that Texas closed down hundreds of voting locations in the wake of a 2013 U.S. Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act. Until the High Court gutted that landmark federal legislation, counties and states with a history of voter suppression had to get approval from the Department of Justice for such decisions. Michael Lee, or Lai, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce it right. I believe it's Michael Lee. It's L.I. is his last name. Redistricting and Voting Counsel at the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University Law School detailed the various reasons it can be hard for Texans to vote in a series of tweets Tuesday. He noted the state's restrictive voter ID law, long primary ballots, and questionable allocation of resources in some places. Texas unquestionably has a lot of problematic voting laws, a restrictive voter ID law among them. But there are also a lot of other complicating factors, including the fact that this primary is not just for president, but for everything down to precinct chair. Okay. He commented on a retweet of an Ari Berman tweet, which is at Ari Berman, ARIBERMAN on Twitter. 4-hour lines in Democratic and minority communities in Texas, a preview of voter suppression, GOP planning for November. Dems need to keep eyes on prize and develop strategy for combating this, in no matter who the nominee is, which is true of that assessment. But we can't keep our eyes off the prize of what the Democratic Party appears to be doing to Bernie Sanders voters and just voters in general. It doesn't matter who they are. If you're alienating voters, even if most of them vote for Bernie Sanders, you're alienating a bunch of voters that don't. And either way, it's undemocratic and it's just absurd and it's just amoral, and we need to keep on the ball with this. So please share the story, share the video, comment. Let's have a conversation here. Let's further the conversation. Let's add facts. Let's get it out there. And just talk to people about it. If in any way, get that information out there. Okay, so let's see. Excuse me. In Texas, Lee explained, it's not just elected offices that are on ballots. Both parties add any number of non-binding opinion questions to the end of the ballot. This year, Texas Democrats had 11 questions to answer in addition to voting on political candidates, most notably those running in the party's presidential primary. Former Vice President Joe Biden won the state, but Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont secured nearly half its pledged delegates. Gutierrez of Common Cause Texas, in his statement Wednesday, called out the state's elected officials for their collective record on voting rights in recent years. Okay, ready? Here's his quote. You can get a clear sense of the anti-voting attitude of those in power by looking at the last few legislative sessions. Reforms that would encourage participation and increase convenience, like online voter registration or requiring poll sites on college campuses, rarely even get a hearing. Bills that would make it harder to register to vote or that erect new barriers to the ballot seem to fly through the legislature. It's time for Texas to stop erecting systemic... Sorry, I just want to make sure let me reread that. It's time for Texas to stop erecting systemic barriers designed to limit participation and simply let Texas vote. Texas's problem at the ballot box could be largely resolved with some straightforward reforms, according to Gutierrez. I think you would have a hard time finding a local election official who doesn't wish they had more voting machines, staff, and poll sites, he said. Most of the election administration issues we see in Texas, including long lines, can be fairly easily resolved if the state would just provide additional resources to the counties. There's a tweet from Common Cause where they comment, and this is important, this one's very important. This is Common Cause, or at Common Cause on Twitter. We need, checkmark, paper ballots instead of machines that break down. Paper registration rolls at the polling locations instead of electronic poll books that break down. More polling locations, more options to vote, early voting, and vote by mail. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. It's a pretty decent assessment. There might be some debate about using digital booths in tandem with paper ballots, but I think paper ballots are more... They're clearly a better system. because there's a lot of stuff going back to like 2000 and the 2004 elections with Bush, where Diebold was given a lot of money from the Republican Party, and lo and behold, there was discoveries all over Florida in both 2000 and 2004 that the machine's original tallies and printing papers, which some people argue, oh, well, they print up a tally. Well, they printed up a duplicate and switched the votes from, in the first place, Gore to Bush, and in the second election in 2004, Bush to Kerry in small counties and multiple counties all over Florida, and stole elections. So, and those people are still free, and we won't even talk about Iraq and all the other terrible things they've done to the environment, etc., and to democracy. But nonetheless, we'll continue with the article, which is almost over. Common Cause's national organization also documented voting issues on Tuesday in California, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Ooh, what a surprise. And all us Bernie people are crazy, right? To work to protect the vote is more important than ever as we continually see partisan attacks on the people's right to vote, serious risks when it comes to election security, and an alarming rise in the spread of disinformation and misinformation on social media, said Common Cause President Karen Hobart Flynn. What we learned today is going to impact how we are going to work with election officials moving forward to make sure in the November elections, voters will be confident their vote counts. And that's a great quote. I hope people fight before, so we actually get the nominee we deserve and want, which all statistics and measures were showing was Bernie Sanders. But somehow Joe Biden just killed it after winning his very first primary and multiple running for president for many, many years and other offices is very, well, not other, excuse me, let me rephrase that, not other offices. So he did run for other offices, to be clear. I'm just saying the primary is not relevant in that situation. I'm talking about president. He ran for president many times and didn't win a single primary, and this is his first primary win, which is telling. I want to read through another Houston Chronicle article to give you a little bit more background on this, and then we're going to end. I mean, there's so much to say here, and I want to give a lot more commentary, but I don't want to make the video too long, and I want people to watch and share it. So I'm going to read a little fast, and I hope that's okay with you guys. Again, I'm going to share the article links at the bottom of the page if you want to investigate them yourselves. All right, this is from Houston Chronicle. Harris County Democrats waited for hours to vote. 2/3 of polling sites were in GOP areas. This is from Zach Despart and Mike Morris on March 4th, 2020. Okay. Many of the 322,000 Harris County Democratic Party voters who surged to the polls Tuesday faced long lines that forced several balloting sites to stay open late into the evening. Though Democrats outnumbered Republicans 2-1 on Election Day, almost 2/3 of the county's voting centers were in county commissioner precincts in West Harris County held by Republicans. And in a decision that worsened delays, the Harris County Clerk's Office placed an equal number of voting machines for each party at every voting center. That meant that in Democratic strongholds like Cashmere Gardens, where Republicans were outnumbered 30-1 during early balloting, Democratic voters languished in line while GOP machines sat unused. Adding to the frustration was a county clerk website that is supposed to show wait times at poll locations. Numerous voters on Tuesday complained the website led them to a polling place showing a minimal wait only to stand for hours because poll workers failed to update the site. They failed to update the site because they were overwhelmed. I have to verify this, but I believe that Texas has volunteers probably, or mostly like New Jersey. I have to look into that, but I'm not sure. But yeah, again, we should, even people that are being paid, I'm sure, are being paid not enough or being paid too little and should be paid more. So anyway, let me continue reading the article here. Housing advocate Chriselle Pillay said she saw 2 or 3 Republican voters while she waited 2 hours to cast her ballot in Kashmir. People were confused and infuriated, Pillay said. They were definitely upset at the approach and how the machines were set up. County Clerk Diane Trautman, again spelled Trautman, and her Twitter handle is @DTroutman. So County Clerk Diane Trautman, a Democrat presiding over her first presidential primary, said Wednesday she wanted to ensure voters from each party had equal access to the polls. We just knew that with county-wide polling, you can't predict. Maybe in some areas, the Republican areas might have been less, but if you put less machines there and then there was a rush on that location, you'd have discrimination. Okay. She said, So it was best to start with equal allocation. Harris County GOP Chairman Paul Simpson said he was perplexed by this approach, noting that his party requested 2,319 voting machines from the county but received 4,147. If this is proven true, and I hope that this person who did this article vetted it properly, that's astonishing. So they only asked the GOP chairman Paul Simpson requested 2,319 voting machines from the county, but received almost 2,000 in excess of 4,147. That is just astonishing. At Texas Southern University, where the longest waits to vote were recorded Tuesday, Republicans requested 4 voting machines, but were given 10, he added. Simpson also provided a February 18th email from Donna Stannard, the GOP's primary election director, to county staff questioning the plan to divide the voting machines equally at each polling center. A 50-50 split will be a problem at the polls that are going to be heavier for Democrats or heavier for Republicans, Stannard wrote. County Democratic Party chairwoman Lily Schechter said Trautman was trying to be fair and over-prepare in a way that ended up just kind of backfiring. Just kind of. The 50 just kind of backfired. Are you listening to these? It's ridiculous. The 50-50 machine allocation caused major voting delays. Houston political analyst Nancy Sims said, though residents can visit any polling site on Election Day rather than an assigned polling place in their home precincts, Sims said there is an ample historical voting data the county clerk can use to distribute machines where they are needed. You heard that, right? Ample historical voting data the county clerk can use to distribute machines where they are needed. Interesting. Maybe we should talk to D. Trautman on Twitter and on other social media sites. Call, email, and do some deep digging on who this person is and why it seems like they obviously made it harder for minority and youth people to vote. Again, people that clearly support Bernie Sanders, particularly in Texas and especially in Texas. Anyway. Okay, the article continues. We should be able to project turnout by precincts, and equality is not always what you need in neighborhoods across the county, Sims said. It drives voters crazy to see all those machines standing over there, not in use, and they've been in line for 3 hours. I'm sure it did and does. In fact, I'm sure it turned away a lot of people and kept them from going in the first place, which was probably the strategy. The article continues. Ultimately, the clerk's office on Tuesday scrambled to dispatch 68 additional machines to some 8 overrun Democratic polling sites in predominantly black and Hispanic neighborhoods, including 3rd Ward, Acres Homes, and Gulfgate. Democratic election workers at a Sunnyside voting center reported functional machines were broken in a successful ruse to get the clerk's office to send more, a spokeswoman for Trautman said. At Texas Southern University, where just 48 Republicans voted early, the final Democratic voter, Hervis Rogers, cast his ballot after waiting more than 6 hours Tuesday. We talked about him earlier in the other article, but I'm going to quote him because I believe that there is some different information here. When I first came up, I started turning around. It was a long line, Rogers said. Everywhere I went, it was a madhouse. Rogers persisted, eventually nabbing a chair to carry in line, and after midnight, camping out in front of a fan to keep cool as compatriots sprawled on the carpeted floor. At 1 a.m., Rogers finally walked into a room with 24 electronic voting machines. 20 minutes later, he emerged to a small crowd of poll workers, reporters, and campus security who were eager to close the building for the night. Well, Rogers said as he headed out, I'm going to get ready for work. Rogers was not the only Texan left waiting Tuesday night. A 44% increase in Democratic turnout statewide and new voting machines in Brexar and Tarrant counties contributed to lengthy wait times across the state. The sheer expanse of Harris County's 1,777 square miles and most in Texas 2.3 million registered voters long has posed problems for county clerks in primary and general elections. It looks like they were before when they were talking about the increase in the population. There might be a contradiction in something I read or a misunderstanding on my part, but it may be a contradiction between the previous article I read and discussed and this one, where it's looking like this is saying there's this is a local source, so they might know more about it. Not necessarily, but 2.3 million registered voters as opposed to 2.3 million increase in the Latinx and Black community. It's very important. I spent a lot of time in this, so that is a point distinction to make, that Harris County has 2.3 million registered voters, and the most in the country, in the state, of Texas. Anyway, let me continue. When Democratic precincts in past elections had extremely long lines, some in the party blamed the Republican county clerk. Democrats, however, have controlled every county-wide post since last year. Oh, interesting. Not to say that the Republicans aren't terrible on this, and even worse in certain instances, in many instances, and have succeeded in hurting voting rights for minorities and have been working at it for years. But it seems like the Democrats are taking advantage of this when they have a candidate that they want to choose, regardless of how incompetent, unethical, or potentially senile or worse this person is. Brain hemorrhages. Talking about Joe Biden. If we're not clear here. The two Harris County Democratic commissioners, Rodney Ellis and Adrian Garcia, said they were concerned with Tuesday's voting issues. Ellis called for a thorough review of what went wrong. It's not acceptable that some people went home unable to exercise their right to vote while others stood in line for hours, Ellis said in a statement. Schechter argued that her Republican counterparts remained a hurdle on Tuesday. In order to preserve voters' newly won ability to cast ballots anywhere on Election Day in a primary, state law requires the political parties to hold a joint primary or agree on shared polling places. The Republicans rejected a joint primary, not wanting their voters to wait in long lines of Democrats engaged by a contested presidential primary. And the GOP does not view countywide voting as crucial the way Democrats do, giving Republicans more leverage in deciding voting sites. The Republicans submitted a map and said, "This is the map we want," Schechter said. "We came back with changes and they said, we're not going to make all these changes. We don't have to have countywide voting. We'll go back to our old way of doing it. We were unable to change 11 locations, but that's it." In the end, 62% of Tuesday's 401 voting centers were in precincts held by Republican commissioners. The same share as in the 2016 primary, when the GOP ran its own election with no Democratic Party involvement at all. By contrast, when the Democrats chose their polling places in the 2016 primary, 55% were in the commissioner precincts held by Democrats. Mary Moreno on the Texas Organizing Project called the allocation of voting sites a glaring injustice. And joined other progressive advocates who see non-white voters as crucial to realizing the Democratic Party's dream of winning statewide office and expressing frustration at the delays. "We're very happy because this is what we've been working for 8 years, to increase the Latino and Black vote," Moreno said, "but it's also a lot to ask people to stand in line for 3 hours." In some cases, voters told the Houston Chronicle at polling sites they decided not to vote after encountering a long line. Others persevered. Betty Amati, who said she was concerned about health care and raising the minimum wage, said she was determined to cast her vote in Kashmir Gardens, even as others in front of her gave up. "I'll stand as long as I have to cast my vote," she said. Samantha Ketterer and St. John Barnard Smith contributed reporting, as well as the people who wrote the article I discussed at the top. So there's a lot to unpack here, and this is already a lengthier video than I wanted to have, so we're not going to unpack it all right now, but I'm just going to say that this is a really big deal. There's a lot of issues all across the primaries and caucuses, and more are going to be revealed, as did in 2016. This should be no surprise to anybody. It's not a bunch of crazy people making nonsense up about a conspiracy that doesn't exist. It's an actual conspiracy against Bernie Sanders. And if you believe in democracy, regardless of whether you support Bernie Sanders or not, then you have to, for now and for future elections, stand up for democracy and make sure everybody has the right to vote. And I'm starting to find it suspect that some people love to use certain phrases when it benefits them, but not when it doesn't benefit them. And I would be the first one, if in a legitimate election, to say, which we have an issue with in this country, in a lot of ways, in a lot of places, definitely federally, I would be the first to say, "Oh my God, my candidate lost, and this person won more votes fair and square, and that person should go." But that doesn't seem to be the case in a lot of ways. So stay tuned to Punk Rock Politics. Stay informed, stay active, help out in any way you can, get involved in campaigns, especially, I shouldn't say especially, for all of you, for regardless of your part, but I say especially for Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders is being just assaulted on a constant basis by the corporate media, the mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, ABC, CBS, Bloomberg, all of these so-called news organizations, which I think we need to change the definition of news organizations. I don't care that they're on cable. That was the excuse they used to allow companies to pretty much say whatever they want, and then we started getting pundits instead of reporters. We started not having to back up our statements with facts. A lot of people are saying. We say a lot of people are saying, or people are saying on the playground. This is a lot of anchors on MSNBC and CNN. And yeah, sure, on your playground in Manhattan, that costs you live in a 10 to 40 or more $1 million apartment in that neighborhood. Are people saying on the playground that they don't like Bernie Sanders or that he can't win? But the statistics are showing the exact opposite, and he's the best slated to beat Trump for a very long time now, including well before this primary. Look into it. He's been one of the best candidates to win since, I believe the data was taken in 2014, possibly 2015, but he's consistently beating Trump in battleground states and nationally. He's tied for a lot of states in winning, and more. And then any other candidate, to be clear, Biden is tied to losing in many states, including key battleground states. So was Warren when she was still in the race, and all these others. Warren needs to get behind Bernie Sanders, but we're going to have another video getting to that real soon. Thanks for watching Punk Rock Politics. Please support the channel, share, comment, share it on social media, talk with your friends and family if you like anything I have to say, and look and do independent research. Don't just read one article. I read way more articles than this before I chose to read these 2 articles. Make sure you know what you're talking about and have ammunition and can show people that are being duped by the elites that there's really a lot of disconcerting and scary voter suppression by both parties for their elite candidates. Thank you again. Have a great day.